The morning of my final interview at Meridian Capital Group, I wore the gray blazer my mentor James had given me when I made my first million. Fit the same way. It always had, quietly without announcement. I took the elevator to the 32nd floor, signed in at reception, and sat in the lobby with a cup of water and my phone, reviewing nothing. I didn't need to review anything. I had built half of what Meridian was about to ask me to manage. That's when the elevator doors opened and my father walked in. Robert Henderson, 61 years old, 32 years as a mid-level operations director at the same manufacturing firm, 4 years from a pension he had never once questioned. He was wearing his brown sport coat, the one he saved for occasions he considered important, and he was already talking loudly to the receptionist before he had fully crossed the threshold. "I'm here about my daughter," he said, straightening his collar. "She has an interview here today and I want to speak with whoever is in charge." I watched him from my chair in the corner. He hadn't seen me yet. I picked up my water and waited. When Mr. Chin, the managing director of Private Wealth, my interviewer, a man I had been corresponding with for 6 months, came out to greet me, he walked directly toward my father first, because my father was standing at the center of the room, announcing himself. "Frankly," my father said, lowering his voice in that way he always did when he wanted to sound authoritative, "she's not ready for this level. I know my daughter. I'm trying to save everyone some time." Mr. Chin nodded carefully. I set down my water, stood, and extended my hand toward my father. "Thanks for stopping by, Dad." His face shifted when he finally looked at me. Something between surprise and the beginning of embarrassment. "Not enough." "Not yet." I smiled at Mr. Chin. "Shall we go up?" From the elevator, I texted my benefits administrator. "Flag the Henderson pension account for annual review. Hold disbursements pending audit." Dad's retirement advisor called him before he reached the lobby doors. I grew up in a house where success had a specific shape. It looked like my father's career, stable, predictable, respected in a radius of about 3 city blocks. Came with a title you could explain at a dinner party in under 5 seconds. Required no risk, no deviation, and absolutely no ambition that exceeded what could be tracked on a linear chart. My name is Claire Henderson. I am 34 years old. And for the first 26 years of my life, I was the daughter who hadn't figured it out yet. My older brother David had figured it out. He had taken a position at my father's firm right after college, worked his way into middle management, and married a woman who organized neighborhood fundraisers. At every family dinner his name came with a nod. Mine came with a question. "Claire is still exploring," my mother would say in the tone of someone explaining a long-term weather delay. "Claire has ideas," my father would add with the inflection of a man describing a benign but inconvenient hobby. I graduated with a finance degree and went directly into a boutique investment advisory firm that most people had never heard of. That was intentional. I wanted to learn without being watched. My father asked twice a year whether I had found something more permanent yet. My mother forwarded job listings for positions at banks where her friends' children worked. I thanked them and filed the emails into a folder I never opened. For 3 years I worked harder than anyone in that office. I arrived before the senior partners and left after the cleaning crew. I studied portfolio structures that hadn't been popular since the 90s and figured out why they had failed and how to fix them. My first independent client account returned 22% in 14 months. My second returned 31%. I told my parents none of this. Not because I was hiding it strategically, not then, but because I had learned through years of small corrections and gentle dismissals that sharing my wins with my father produced one of 2 responses: skepticism or a redirect to David's latest accomplishment. "That sounds good," he would say in the same tone he used to acknowledge a child's drawing. "But is it stable? Is there a pension? What does the career path look like in 10 years? I stopped sharing by the time I was 28. The distance between us grew gradually, the way cracks in a foundation grow. Not dramatic until the day something shifts. My father's commentary remained consistent. At my cousin's wedding, he told the table I was still finding her footing. Thanksgiving one year, he explained to a family friend that I worked in finance some kind of consulting thing, with the vagueness of a man describing a country he had never visited. When I bought my apartment, a 2-bedroom in a building whose address I chose specifically for the parking, he asked if the mortgage was manageable. I paid cash, I told him. Well, he said, still. Be careful. I was 29. I had $2.3 million in managed assets and a client list that was growing by referral only. I smiled and changed the subject. The moment I understood that my silence was not a wound but a strategy came. The year I turned 31. My father sat across from me at Sunday lunch and spent 20 minutes explaining why I should consider taking a position at a firm where his colleague's son was a mid-level analyst. A firm I had been quietly advising for 9 months. I listened. I nodded. I did not correct him. When I got home, I opened my portfolio dashboard and looked at the numbers. And I made a decision I had been circling for years. I would let him believe whatever he believed. I would build what I was building. And someday the distance between his version of me and the real one would become impossible to ignore. I didn't know that afternoon exactly how it would happen. I didn't know it would happen in a 32nd floor lobby with Mr. Chen nodding carefully and my father's retirement account on the other end of a text message. By the time my father walked into Meridian Capital Group's lobby that Tuesday morning, I had been managing private wealth portfolios for 6 years. My firm, Henderson Advisory Group, a name I had chosen with the particular satisfaction of someone signing their name to something that was entirely theirs, managed $47 million in assets across 31 clients. Our 3-year average return was 28%. I had been profiled in a regional financial journal my father did not read. Had been invited to speak at 2 industry conferences he did not attend. None of this appeared on any document my family had ever seen. The Meridian opportunity had come through James Whitfield, my mentor and the person most responsible for the shape of my career. James had spent 30 years at the top of private wealth management before retiring to a board advisory role, and he had taken an interest in my work after reading a white paper I published, under a pen name, on alternative portfolio structures for high-net-worth clients approaching retirement. He called me cold. Asked if I was the Claire Henderson who had written it. Yes. He said he would like to meet. That was 4 years ago. Since then, James had introduced me to 12 clients, opened doors at 3 institutions, and 3 months before the Meridian interview, forwarded me an email from their managing director with a note that said simply, "You're ready. Go." Meridian Capital Group was not a household name. It was better than that. Managed legacy wealth for 63 families, most of whom had been clients for 2 generations or more. As managing director of private wealth, the role I was interviewing for, oversaw $340 million in assets and reported directly to the firm's founding partners. It was the kind of position that didn't get posted on job boards. Arrived by referral or you didn't arrive. I had spent 6 months preparing. I knew Meridian's portfolio history, their client retention rate, their performance through 3 market corrections. Had read every public document associated with the firm and several that were not public. I had spoken with Mr. Chen 4 times by phone and once over lunch. He knew exactly who I was and what I had built. What he had not known until that Tuesday morning was who my father was. And what my father had never known, what he had never once considered, was that the pension plan for Hartwell Manufacturing, where he had worked for 32 years, was administered through a benefits management group whose primary financial advisor was Henderson Advisory Group. Me. I had taken on Hartwell as a client 14 months earlier through a referral from a former colleague. I had never mentioned it to my father. There was no reason to. It was a mid-size manufacturing firm with a solid pension program that needed modest restructuring. I had done the work, filed the reports, and moved on. Until the morning my father stood in a lobby and told my interviewer that his daughter was not ready for this level. I found out later, from my mother, who called me that evening in a state of controlled panic, exactly how it had happened. My mother had overheard a phone call. 3 weeks earlier I had made the only mistake in years of careful silence. I had taken a call from Mr. Chen's assistant while I was at my parents' house for Sunday dinner. I had stepped into the hallway. It had been brief. But my mother had heard the words Meridian Capital and final interview before. I closed the door. She had told my father. My father had looked up Meridian Capital Group. He had seen the address. He had decided, in the full genuine conviction of a man who had spent 32 years, believing he understood how the world worked, that he was doing me a favor. She gets nervous, he told my mother according to her account. She'll oversell herself. They'll see right through it. I'm just going to have a word. Man to man. Explain the situation. My mother had not stopped him. She had learned over 40 years that stopping my father from an act of confident helpfulness was not worth the conversation it required. So he put on his brown sport coat. He drove 40 minutes into the city. The elevator to the 32nd floor and walked to the reception desk and announced himself. And when Mr. Chin came out to receive a scheduled appointment, me, father intercepted him with the absolute certainty of a man who had never once been wrong about his daughter because he had never once taken the time to actually be right. He told the managing director of private wealth at one of the most selective wealth management firms in the region that his daughter, the woman who had restructured the pension of the very company funding his retirement, was not ready for this level. And then he waited in the lobby to hear how the conversation went. In the elevator, Mr. Chin stood beside me with the careful neutrality of a man who had spent 30 years managing the financial affairs of families with complicated dynamics. He said nothing about what had just happened in the lobby. Neither did I. On the ride up, he said, I reviewed your Hartwell portfolio report again this week. The liability restructure was elegant work. Thank you, I said. Once you understood the exposure structure, the path forward was fairly direct. He nodded. Then, without looking away from the elevator doors, your father doesn't know. It wasn't a question. No, I confirmed. The doors opened on 32. We stepped into the conference room. Floor-to-ceiling windows. The city laid out below us like a document I had been studying for years. Before I sat down, I sent one text. My benefits administrator Teresa, careful, efficient, 4 years with my firm, received it at 9:47 a.m. Flag the Henderson pension account for annual review. Hold disbursements pending audit. I want to be precise about what this text did and did not mean. It did not eliminate my father's pension. It did not reduce $1 of what he had earned over 32 years of work. It placed a temporary administrative hold on disbursement processing, a standard procedure during any formal review period, and triggered a notification to the account holder's registered financial advisor. That advisor was Gerald Park at Westside Retirement Planning. Gerald was competent, thorough, and mildly anxious by professional temperament. He received an automated notification that the Henderson account had been flagged for review by the plan's primary advisor. He called my father immediately. My father was still in the lobby, still adjusting his sport coat, still, I imagine, feeling the quiet satisfaction of a man who had done right by his family. His phone rang. He looked at the screen. Gerald Park. He answered. I was, at that moment, shaking hands with Mr. Chin across a conference table on the 32nd floor with the city spread wide behind the windows and 2 hours of conversation ahead of me that I had spent 6 months preparing for. James had told me once that this kind of view reminds you why the work matters. I understood exactly what he meant. The interview lasted 2 hours and 11 minutes. When I returned to the lobby, my father was sitting in one of the chairs near the window. He had not left. This surprised me less than it might have surprised someone who had grown up with a different kind of father. Robert Henderson did not retreat. He regrouped. He stood when he saw me. Claire. His voice had changed. The confidence was still present, but it was load-bearing now, the way confidence sounds when it is working hard to stay upright. Gerald called me. Something about my pension account being flagged. I know, I said. I flagged it. The silence that followed was the kind that changes the shape of a room. He stopped. Started over. What do you mean you flagged it? I sat down in the chair across from him. Not because I needed to sit. Because I wanted this conversation to happen at eye level. Hartwell Manufacturing's pension plan is administered through my firm, I said. Henderson Advisory Group. I have been the primary financial advisor on that account. For 14 months. He stared at me. Your retirement account sits within that plan, I continued. Which means that for the past 14 months, the person overseeing the financial health of your pension has been me. My father's mouth opened, closed. He looked at the reception desk as though it might offer some alternative explanation. He looked at the elevator. He looked at his hands. That's not, he started. That can't be. I can show you the documentation. I opened my bag and placed a single folder on the small table between us. Inside was a copy of the advisory agreement between Henderson Advisory Group and Hartwell Manufacturing, signed 14 months ago. My signature was on page 3. You can also call Hartwell's HR department. They'll confirm it. He picked up the folder. He read the first page slowly. He turned to the second. He set it down. Why didn't you tell me? He asked. The question was genuine. That was the thing I hadn't expected, that his first response wasn't anger or dismissal but something that looked underneath the confusion like hurt. Because you didn't ask, I said carefully. You have been telling me what I was. For 8 years, Dad. You never asked what I was building. He was quiet. The lobby was quiet. Somewhere behind the reception desk, a printer ran briefly and stopped. How much does your firm manage? He asked. 47 million. 31 clients. 3-year average return of 28%. I watched him take that in. Not the number itself. Numbers had never been the point. But the reality that those numbers represented. 6 years. Hundreds of decisions. A client list built on reputation that he had never known existed. A firm named after both of us, Henderson, that he had known nothing about. I came here because I thought. He stopped. I thought I was helping. I know why you came, I said. You thought you were protecting me. I was protecting you. You told my interviewer I wasn't ready for this level. Kept my voice even. Mr. Chin has been my contact at Meridian for 6 months. He knows my portfolio history. He knows the Hartwell restructure. He knows exactly what I'm ready for. I looked at my father directly. You told a man who has studied my work for half a year that I wasn't qualified. You have never once looked at my work. In 8 years you have never once asked to. He didn't answer. Outside the city moved in the way cities move, continuous, indifferent, unbothered by whatever happened in any single lobby. The pension hold, he said finally. Is that something you're going to? It's a temporary administrative review, I said cleanly. It will be lifted by end of week. Your disbursements will not be affected. He exhaled. I want to be clear about something. I said it quietly without edge. I'm not doing this to punish you. I'm doing this because for 8 years you have spoken over me, around me and about me without ever looking at what I actually do. Today you did it in front of someone who matters professionally. I need you to understand that those two things are related. My father looked at the folder. He looked at the window. He looked at me. I didn't know, he said. I know you didn't, I said. That is the point. I stood. I picked up my bag. I shook his hand, firm, brief, professional, the same way I had shaken it 2 hours earlier, and I walked to the elevator. I did not look back. Not because I was angry, but as I had said everything there was to say, and there was nothing behind me that required my attention anymore. Mr. Chin offered me the position that afternoon. The email arrived at 4:22 p.m. A formal offer letter for the role of Managing Director of Private Wealth at Meridian Capital Group, effective the 1st of the following month. I read it twice, forwarded it to James with no subject line, and sat in my apartment for 20 minutes in complete silence. James called within the hour. Told you, was all he said. Teresa lifted the administrative hold on my father's pension account Wednesday morning as I had told him she would. I received a confirmation at 8:14 a.m. and filed it. Without reply. My father called Thursday evening. I let it go to voicemail. He left a message. 3 minutes and 40 seconds long. I did not listen to it until Sunday. My mother called Friday. I answered on the second ring. He's not sleeping, she said. I know that's hard, I said. He didn't mean to. Mom. I said her name quietly, not sharply. He meant exactly what he said. He has been meaning it for 8 years. The problem isn't that he doesn't love me. The problem is that he has never seen me. I let a moment pass. I'm not angry. I need him to understand that there are consequences to not paying attention. She was quiet. He wants to have lunch. Tell him yes, I said. But not yet. My brother David called Saturday. He had heard the full story from my mother. I didn't know either, he said after a long pause. I know, I told him. 47 million, he said, not quite a statement, not quite a question. And growing, I said. There was a long silence. Then David laughed, the real kind, unguarded, the kind I hadn't heard from him in years. Claire, he said. God. It was the best phone call we'd had in a decade. We had lunch 6 weeks later. A restaurant I chose, quiet, unhurried, no occasion attached. My father arrived before me. He was wearing the brown sport coat again. Noticed when I sat down that he had gotten it dry cleaned. We ordered. We talked about small things first. The weather, David's kids, my mother's ongoing project to redesign the back garden. My father was careful in a way he had never been careful with me before. He was reading me, trying to find the right distance, the right register. It was, I realized, the first time he had ever tried to find those things with me at. Halfway through the meal he set down his fork. I looked you up, he said. After everything. Your firm. The journal article. The conference presentations. He paused. The Hartwell report. I waited. It's good work, Claire. He said it plainly. No qualifier, no redirect. It's genuinely good work. Thank you, I said. I should have asked, he said. A long time ago. I should have asked. There are moments that want to be large, that pull toward speeches, toward the clean resolution of everything that needed resolving. I had spent years in abstract moments imagining what I might say when this conversation finally arrived. I had rehearsed versions of it during long drives and late evenings when his dismissals were still fresh. But sitting across from him at that table, the sport coat dry cleaned, his hands wrapped around a water glass, the city quiet outside, what I felt was not the satisfaction I had imagined. It was something smaller and more real. Something close to relief. You couldn't have asked, I said, if you had already decided. He nodded slowly. I know. I'm not asking you to become a different person, I told him. I'm asking you to be curious about who I actually am. I picked up my fork. That's all I ever wanted from you. He didn't respond right away. He picked up his fork too. We ate. The restaurant hummed quietly around us. Outside, the street ran on. Before we left, my father asked, carefully, without the weight of a man who had already decided the answer, how did you know that you were ready for Meridian? I thought about James's email, about Mr. Chen's 4 phone calls and the lunch, where he'd asked me about my long-term philosophy and listened for 45 minutes, without interrupting, about the folder I had placed on the lobby table and the years of work that folder represented. Because someone who had actually watched me work told me I said. My father was quiet for a moment. Then he nodded, slowly, without argument, without redirect. It was not an apology. It was not a transformation. It was the beginning of a man deciding at 61 that it was not too late to pay attention. For now that was enough. And the pension account? Fully restored. Fully intact. Earning a 28% annual return. Managed as it had always been by me.